Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to wait a minute or two. It's not quite past yet. Thank you for joining me. And we shall get started in just 1 minute. Just get myself sorted here. Right, just going to just about past. This will be recorded and I will send anybody that wants a link. Hopefully it'll be up on YouTube as a private link. So don't worry, nobody else will see it. Good evening. Thank you. Nice to see you. I'm going to mute everybody for the moment. And I will stop at various points to take questions. Okay. Right. Okay. Just bear with me 1 second. Let me find what I need. Right, now we can get started. Okay. Oh, I can see my wife in the next room. That's great. Okay. I will wait 1 more minute if that's okay with people, just because I'm okay. You're all muted, I think. Okay, I'm going to mute everybody just for the moment, and then I'll take questions I'll stop at various points and take questions. Okay? Well, I may need to do this a few times. Okay, let's get started. I think punctuality is a virtue. That's the way I was brought up anyway. And it's just after, it's past. It's just about 2 minutes after, so let's get started. Okay, thank you all for joining me. It was really interesting to see that of the various choices that I gave, that the Ramchal, and specifically Derech Hashem, was such a favorite, which really raises an interesting question. Now, some of you may well forgive me if I don't know what exposure you had to Derech Hashem. Although Raquel told me earlier, apparently Rachel Baum used to do Derech Hashem. Maybe that's where some of you got an appetite for it from, in which case, kol hakavod to her. But I guess I'm going to do it my way, as a certain person said. So let's do it. Let's do it. Let's start as follows. Let's start in the following way. Tonight will be a bit of an introduction, and actually he wrote an introduction. He wrote an introduction to his Sefer, which tells us a lot about himself and a lot about what he is trying to achieve. I want to give you a very brief biographical background so that you get some sort of appreciation of where Derech Hashem fits into his incredible literary output. He was a prolific writer, and the first thing that strikes me when I look through, I have here actually a rough list. If I could ask everybody to please mute themselves, it would be really helpful. Thank you. I have a rough list of the different Sfarim that he wrote, and at the age, be aware that from the age of 16, he wrote his first Sefer at the age of 16, which is quite incredible. And in fact, he wrote most of his Sfarim between the ages of 16. By the time he was 28, he had written, I don't have an exact count here, but he had written, I would say, the vast majority of his Sfarim he'd already written by the age of 28, which was by 1735. And what's fascinating to note is that most of his Sfarim that he wrote in his younger days, so to speak, remember he tragically died at the age of 39, were Kabbalistic. These were Kabbalistic works, clearly, overtly. You and I couldn't pick them up and make head or tail of them. They are absolutely very strong Kabbalistic works. Did you know, for example, he wrote his own Tehillim? I don't know whether you know that. He wrote 150 Mizmorim and he called them a Tehillim. He wrote Tikkunim, he wrote a Zohar Chodosh, he wrote a massive amount of very clearly Kabbalistic works, total Kabbalah. And he did those when he was much, much younger. And then a really, really interesting thing. When he was 29, roughly in the year 1736, he writes this Sefer, Derech Hashem, at the grand old age of 29. Yeah, well, he's written most of his Sfarim already. And then when he's 33, in the year 1740, he writes Mesilas Yesharim. And then he goes up to Eretz Yisrael in 1743, and he dies at the age of 39. And he doesn't write at the end of his life when he was 33, he wrote a few Sfarim, you know, as one does, but really quite few compared to the output that he had earlier in his life, and they were not Kabbalah Sfarim. It was really interesting. Usually, you kind of think of the development of a person's brain and their ability to understand Torah. It progresses from, you know, Chumash and Mishnah and Gemara. Then you get into the old, you know, Kabbalah and the deeper aspects of Torah, and he does it the other way around, which is, to me, is absolutely fascinating. By the way, there is another. Oh, please turn your mics off. There is another explanation to this, of course, and that is the one we're not going to go into tonight. And that is, of course, because he came up against tremendous opposition, and he was forced to. Maybe we'll do one share just on the story of his life, perhaps, because it is absolutely fascinating, quite tragic. He was forced. Even his own Rebbe turned against him. Rabbi Shiur Basan. It was, and I have here. I'll show you a sefer that I have here. This sefer is Igrei Saramchal. These are just his letters. The letters by him and to him from his Rebbe and others, Talmidim, and letters flew backwards and forwards, some of them from Germany as well, places in Germany, by the way, Frankfurt, in Frankfurt he was forced to sign that he would never teach Kabbalah again. And maybe that explains to some extent that we don't find him writing Kabbalah later. But that's kind of by the way. But what I want to, so that's just a very, very tiny biographical background. Now I want to go into something else. When you ask the average person to please think of, if I were to ask you, I'm not going to do it now, but but if I were to ask you, think of two Sfarim that the Ramchal wrote. I imagine, I'll put money down, if I was a betting man, I would put money down that everybody would say, Mesilas Yesharim and Derech Hashem. I imagine so. He's very well known for his Mesilas Yesharim, and he's very well known for his Derech Hashem. Now, let's think about these two Sfarim, because in one place he writes that actually they are sister Sfarim. They correspond to each other in an interesting sort of way. And I'll explain what I mean. Whoops. Yeah, I'll explain what I mean. And here I want you to think a little bit about the titles of those Sfarim. We have, let me translate them, Mesilas Yesharim, which is usually translated, at least by Feldheim, as the path of the just. Mesila is a word for a path. And then we have Derech Hashem. We have, again, a pathway of Hashem, to Hashem, of Hashem. We could discuss what that means. But is it not interesting that these two Sfarim are entitled paths? But let's take this a bit deeper, and let's try and, because I think this is really important for us before we start Derech Hashem, to compare and contrast these two, the most famous of his non-Kabbalistic Sfarim. We have the path of the Yesharim, a Yashar. What is a Yashar? What do we think about when we think about somebody is Yashar? They are straight, they are just. They do that which is correct. And then we have Derech Hashem, we have the path of Hashem. And I think the way to explain this is as follows. Let's open up the Mesilas Yesharim in your mind, and let me read for you the first phrase in Mesilas Yesharim. And it goes as follows. Yesoid ha-chasidus v'shoresh ha-avodah ha-tmima. The foundation of chasidus, piety, Who or what is a chassid? Does anybody know? I'll tell you what a chassid is. A chassid is not somebody with a, some sort of dead furry animal on his head and, big payers. That's not what a chassid means. Certainly not when he wrote it. A chassid is somebody who goes above and beyond the letter of the law. He does not stick to what is correct. Of course he does that which is correct. He or she does that which is correct. But they go way beyond that. And they are called a chassid. Whereas the word that we use, the term that we use for somebody that does exactly what is demanded and expected of them, there we use a different term. The term there is tzaddik. A tzaddik does tzedek, does that which is correct. And here I just want to add a comment that needs to be made. Tzedakah, which is connected to the word tzaddik, and tzedek, a righteous person, and justice, you should now begin to understand that the word tzedakah does not mean the way that it is translated in English, which is charity. A person who gives charity, the idea is you don't have to give a penny, you don't have to give anything. But if you are charitable, you're a tzaddik, you get charity. You're doing something above and beyond the letter of the law. This is not true in Judaism. It's not true in halacha. There is a halacha that you must give tzedakah. You don't have a choice. There are hilchos tzedakah. There are laws of charity. How much you have to give, when you have to give, etc. Because it is tzedek, it is appropriate and just and correct to give tzedakah. A tzaddik gives tzedakah. And then there is something else altogether, which is to be a chassid, to go above and beyond. And therefore, what we have over here is in Mesilas Yesharim is a Musa sefer. He's talking about chasidus and avodah hatmima. He is talking about piety. He is talking about, and that's why the whole language of the sefer Mesilas Yesharim is divided into chapters where each of them talk about a personal quality, an attribute, a midah. For example, zehirus, being careful, zerizus, being quick, chasidus, precious, kedusha, anova, humility, holiness, saintliness. This is the way Mesilas Yesharim is based. And his goal and his job in Mesilas Yesharim is to encourage and to motivate people to feel certain things, which will then lead them to going above and beyond what they absolutely have to do. It is the foundation of Hasidus, and that's why it appeals to the heart much more than to the head. Although it is true, he clarifies things in Mesilas Yesharim. But the word Yashar, where do we find the word Yashar? Always in Tanakh. Oir Zorua Latzadik, that's first stage. Oir Zorua Latzadik. There is a light for the tzaddik, because a tzaddik is somebody who has clarity, he has light. He or she knows what is right and what is wrong. And then there is something beyond. Uli Yishrei Leiv Simcha. To those who are Yoshar in their leiv, in their heart, that's emotive. And therefore, they are rewarded with the emotion of Simcha. But there is a process. So therefore, I think it's no surprise that he published Derech Hashem first, because Derech Hashem is a philosophical work. It appeals to the head. And that's why he starts, for example, now let's contrast the opening phrases of these two Svarim. So I quoted to you already, Mesilas Yesharim starts with the foundation of Chasidus, and the root of Avodah Tmima, perfect Avodah, is that a person should know what is Chayvasoi Ba'ilamai, what is his obligation in his world. And whereas Derech Hashem starts with the following words, Kol Ishmi Yisrael, everybody in Klal Yisrael, Tzorich Sheyamin V'yeda, should believe and know that there is an entity called Hashem. So there are some similarities, but they break down very quickly. First, he wrote and published Derech Hashem, which is a work which is appealing to the head. It is to clarify. And my final comment on this, I suppose, is we say Tzadik Hashem b'chol derachov v'chosid b'chol ma'asov. Hashem is a tzaddik in all of his derachim. Again, that word tzedek, tzaddik being associated with derech. whereas v'chosid b'chol ma'asov. Hashem is a chosid in what he does. Now, let me pose a question, one final point, and then we'll get straight down to his introduction, where I will allow him in his own words to tell us what the Sefer is about and what he's trying to achieve. One of the things that bothered me when I thought about this a little bit was, you see, Mesilas Yesharim, I'm fine with that title. Do you know why? Because it's taken straight from a posuk in Mishlei, which says Mesilas Yesharim. That's fine. But then I thought to myself, Derech Hashem, where does he get this word from? You see, that phrase in the Torah, Derech Hashem, occurs once and once only in that form. The word, those two words together, Derech Hashem, once in the Chumash. The plural we have a few times. For example, let me give you an example, and with this, let me ask you a question. In Devarim, later on, it says, V'holachta b'drachav. We are told that we should walk in Hashem's ways. So the first point we notice is that Hashem has more than one way. There is drachav, there is plural, and we are obligated to follow V'holachta b'drachav. We should go in his ways. And here the Gemara tells us, and the Ramban paskins, that from here we learn that we should emulate, we should copy, we should imitate Hashem. Mahu rachum, afator rachum. Just as he is kind and compassionate, you should also be. And this we learn from V'holachta b'drachav, because Hashem manifests in many different ways. The Gemara says, Mahu mevakeres hacholim, afator mevakeres hacholim. Just as he visits the sick, you should visit the sick. Just as he buries the dead, you should bury the dead. Just as he is involved in hachnos haskala, you should be. So there are more than one of Hashem's ways. So why did he call his Sefer Derech Hashem? So in order to understand this, I think we have to look into the one and only time in the Torah which uses this phrase, Derech Hashem, and we read it not that long ago. And here we see something interesting. Hashem is about to destroy Sodom, and he reaches out to Avram Avinu, and he says, I'm not going to hide from Avram Avinu what I am about to do. I'm not going to hide it. Do you know why? Ki yedativ, says Hashem, because I know Avraham. And that word das is an important one. It means to know, to love, to connect to. Ki yedativ, says Hashem, I'm going to have a meaningful, intimate relationship with Avraham. Why? Lema'an asher yitzave es bonov ve'es beisoi achrov v'shomru derech Hashem la'asois tzedakah mishpat. Do you know why? Because I know that he is going to command his children. Remember, he doesn't have any children yet. He has just been informed that by the angels he's going to have. But Hashem says, I want him to be involved in the way that I interact with this world. Why? Because I want to have a relationship with him. Because I know he is going to command his children to v'shomru es derech Hashem. Now this phrase is a really important one. V'shomru. V'shomru v'nei Yisrael es hashabos. Zocher v'shomer means to guard, to maintain, to preserve. It implies there is something there, and you don't need to create this thing. The word shomer, translate it. When you're told to guard something, that means there is something already there. Just don't drop it. Don't break it. Don't destroy it. Don't let go of it. Cherish it. Preserve it. Maintain it. Guard it. That's what v'shomru means. So there is this thing called Derech Hashem. And Hashem says, I know that Avraham will guard this. He'll keep this. Number one, that shows he recognizes it. He knows there is such a thing. And he will instruct his children and all those that come after him to preserve this fragile, delicate, beautiful thing called Derech Hashem. So it's there. You don't need to create Derech Hashem. It's there. But he will tell them to preserve it. How? And the pasuk goes on. La'asois tzedakah u'mishpat. To do justice and judgment. Back to what did we start with? Derech Hashem, I told you, is for the Chacham. Mesilas Yesharim is for the Chosid. Derech Hashem is for the tzaddik, who wants to do tzedek. But in order to do tzedek, you need to know. You need to know what is right and what is wrong. It is correct. Avraham Avinu knew that it's right to do tzedek, tzedakah, and mishpat. That proves what I said before, by the way. Tzedakah is not some noble, lovely act. That would be, a chassid would do tzedakah. No, Avraham Avinu is preserving Derech Hashem. How? By commanding people to do justice, tzedakah, umishpat, and judgment. This is the Derech Hashem. What is this Derech Hashem? And here I'm going to pose a bit of a problem, a question, which we may possibly get the answer to tonight. If not, it'll be next week. You see, really what the Derech Hashem is, when Hashem, here's the secret. Hashem tells Avram, Hashem says, I'm going to have a relationship with Avram because I know that he will preserve Derech Hashem. That means, how do you preserve something? That means you've got it already. That means Avram Avinu used his talents, his resources, his brain to work out that he has something inside of him that is special. He creates a level of self-awareness that discovers HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself when nobody else can, and he realizes that he is a divine being. He is created b'tselem Elokim. He works that out. And it's actually the logic itself that lets him do that. The fact that animals are not able to do this. They're not able to have that level of self-awareness and make moral judgments. As I've often said, you may or may not have heard it from me, we don't find any vegetarian lions, any vegan lions, struck by a midlife crisis that it's just wrong to eat, other creatures. And we must save the planet. And these are moral judgments, that the very fact that you're making them shows that you are something, you can think outside of your own existence and look in on your own existence. And Avram says, how come I can do this? And I can search for meaning and purpose. It is because I am endowed with something special. I'm a tselem Elokim, and therefore I need to act with tzedek and tzedakah and mishpat. That is the Derech Hashem. It's inside of you. Acknowledge it. Preserve it. V'shomru es Derech Hashem. In other words, it's a process, which is therefore expected. That's why it's in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. You don't even need to be Jewish for this to be expected and demanded of you. Sodom was destroyed, says Yechezkel Hanavi, because they were an affluent society. Seveas lechem, they had loads of resources, but there was no welfare state. V'yidei aniyim ve'evyonim lo hechzika. They didn't do tzedakah. In fact, they institutionalized cruelty. What is Midas Sodom, says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos? Sheli, sheli, shalcha, shalcha. What is mine is mine. What is yours is yours. Now you could say, what's so terrible about that? If everybody lived by that idea, that I preserve and I look after the things that are mine, and I don't touch anything that isn't mine, the world would be a pretty decent place. I look after my stuff, you look after your stuff, and we'll never interfere in each other's domains. That wouldn't be such a bad thing. Not so, says the Mishnah. That's Midas Sodom. What happens to Sodom? Hashem destroys it. Why? Because a human being needs to understand that inside of him beats a heart and a mind that is divine in origin, and intuitively understands it is right to look out for and to care for others. And if you have the time and the energy and the resources, you have a moral duty as a divine being to do tzedakah u'mishpat. That is to recognize the Derech Hashem and to preserve it. And Avram Avinu did that. And that justified Hashem's relationship with him. The catch in all of this is, the Derech Hashem that we have just identified is one that does not require Torah or Gilui or revelation. It doesn't require Sinai. It doesn't require, in fact, that's the whole of Sefer Bereshis. The whole of Sefer Bereshis is the Derech Eretz, which is called the Torah. That Derech Eretz is the same as Derech Hashem. It's a story of failed civilizations, one after the other, that failed to realize what it means to be human, and they wrote themselves off the map. They were no longer human in the full sense of the word, and Hashem had nobody to speak to until Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov came along, and they fundamentally, they lived up to what it means to be a Tselem Elokim, a human being in all its nobility and majesty, to being preserving the Derech Hashem. Hashem said, fine, you've gone as far as you can go, now I'll give you the rest. I will reveal to you through the Nevi'im and Torah how you can elevate yourself even further. But that is very clearly the process. Okay, I will stop now for a minute or two, and I will unmute you in case there are any questions. I don't even know how to do this. Hold on, that says mute all. Let's see if I can. Yes, so I've given you the ability to unmute yourself. If anybody wants to ask anything at this stage, we'll have 5 minutes of questions, and then I will move on to the text itself. No, you're still muted. That's not working. You have the option of unmuting yourself. I've given you the ability of unmuting yourself if you want. So,
yes, Kivot Harav, I have a question.
Yes, who is
Sorry.
this?
This is Rivka calling.
Hi.
What is actually the exact difference between Derech Hashem and Derech Eretz?
Well, they are very, very similar. I'm not sure that there is a major difference for the purposes of our conversation. For the purposes of this shiur, they can be considered to be synonymous.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, of course, there is slightly more subtle differences, but for our purposes, that absolutely suffices. Okay? Anybody else? Maybe it was all so simple. Okay. No more questions? We'll get right into it. Okay. If you have a text in front of you, I don't know whether you did, and B'li Neder, next time I did send a link to Sefaria, who do a free Hebrew and English version of Derech Hashem. And maybe, B'li Neder, perhaps for next week, I will create a bit of a source sheet, some other stuff to go with it. Okay, so let's head right into his Hakdama. I'm not going to read every line because I don't think, it would take too long. I have highlighted for myself the bits that I think are significant. And the first thing and this, by the way, is something which both the Mesilas Yesharim and Derech Hashem have in common. And you have to appreciate that one of the Rebbes of the Ramchal was somebody called Rabbi Yitzchak Lampronti. And he wrote a very, very interesting set of Sforim. It's known as KAJ Yitzchak. It is a 10-volume encyclopedia of Yiddishkeit. The Ramchal was also in other words, the concept of systemizing, categorizing, seder, is one that is a central theme that actually runs through all of the Ramchal's works, his Kabbalistic works as well. He writes them in order to help us gain an understanding of system and category, the opposite of random and haphazard. The Ramchal, do you know what he did? Pumbaruf, as they say, he was a lens grinder. He was very interested in science. Science is all about, well, different parts of science, but it's very much about taxonomy is the correct term, categorization. Where does something fit into a big scheme of things? And in Mesilas Yesharim, he does this as well. Even in Mesilas Yesharim, where he's dealing with the duties of the heart, midas, such as being a precious, anova, yiraschet, kedusha, tahara. We think these are nice, warm, fuzzy ideas. You know, just be nice, be good, be kind. Oh, no way, says the Mesilas Yesharim. There is a very definite process, and if you mix it up, you mess it up. You must have Torah first. Then comes Zehirus. Then comes Zerizus. Then comes Nikius. And if you try and jump, if you don't know what it is, recognize it, work on it, and then and only then move on to the next step, you will be a fragmented, all over the place kind of person. And that won't work. In the same way that he opens his Mesilas Yesharim with the words, the foundation of Chasidus. Think about it. What do you think about when you think about the word foundation? Yesod HaChasidus. I could not think of two more incongruous words. Chasidus is piety. It's just, go with the flow. You think of sort of hippie, very unstructured. Yes? Sitting in the forest and, with kumbaya and whatever. That's what you think of with the word Chasidus. But what word does he associate it with? It Yesod. Yesod is a foundation. What is a foundation? It's when you want to build something. Depending on how high the structure is going to be, you must have deep, deep concrete foundations and steel rods and rigidity and structure and form. And you need a scientist and an architect to work out exactly. And he says, Yesod HaChasidus. Because, of course, everything is about order, even if it's Chasidus. And the same thing is in this Sefer. In fact, this is actually what this Sefer is about. He wrote this Sefer to correct something that is still so prevalent today, 200 years on, more. It's still so fresh and relevant. It took me, it still takes me, but when I was growing up, when you, and I hope this resonates with you, because it should. You hear a Dvar Torah here, a Shiur there, an idea here, and you have a sort of various Torah ideas floating around. But what is so often tragically missing is, where do they all slot in? Which one is primary? Which one is secondary? And this will speak to priorities also. Which one, and I see this when I get questions as a Rav also, people start sometimes, and this is not just here in Berlin, it's everywhere, is this, I don't want to say this in a way that pokes fun, because I don't mean to poke fun, but you sometimes get questions and you realize from the question that when that person has absorbed Torah, they did it in it's not a criticism, God forbid, but it's done in a random haphazard fashion, and they haven't really understood what is more important, what is less important, and they're unable to prioritize. At least they ask, which is amazing. But imagine if we had clarity in Yiddishkeit as a system. That would be awesome. And that's what this Sefer is. That is what it is. And he starts off and he says, if you have a mind that yearns for knowledge, it's al seichel hamishtoikik lodas, and you end up with fragmentation. Imagine if you spend time learning and absorbing ideas and you still don't know where to put things. It is very, very frustrating, he says. It creates vanilla, v'oyef, v'ein nachas. You become tired. There's no nachas. There's no simcha. Because you're still yearning. You know that you haven't got it. You've got a bit of an idea, but you don't know how important it is. You don't know where to place it in the bigger picture. And therefore he says, and here, I'm now going on, those of you following with me, into the second paragraph of the Hakdama. He says, whenever you come across an idea in the Torah, you need to ask the following 8 questions. Here we go. You ready? You have to ask yourself, what is this? And Bli Neder, I'll make you a little chart. It's very simple. If you're following with me, it's towards the end of the second paragraph. And he says you need to ask these 8 questions. Hakoil, I'll translate in a second. Hakoil v'hachelek, haklal v'haprat, hasiba v'hamasoivav, hanoisei v'hamischaber. What does that mean? You need to ask yourself as follows. When you come across an idea in Torah, you need to ask yourself the following. The data, the knowledge that I've just gained, is this it? Is this hakoil? Is this all that is to be said in this particular area? Or maybe it's only a chelek. Maybe what I've just heard is a small part of something. And then I need to ask myself, is this haklal or is this a prat? Is this idea that I've just heard, is this a rule or is this a detail which emerges from a prior rule? And even when you have clarity on that, you still need to ask, is this a cause or is this an effect? Is this an outcome? Is it a mesovev? Or is this a sibah? It's a cause. And then you need to ask yourself, finally, so we've had 6 so far, is it all or is it part? Is it a general rule or is it a detail? Is it a cause or is it an effect? And finally, perhaps the most subtle of all, is this hanoise v'hamischaber. I'll try and say it as best as I can. Is this substantive? Is this elemental? Is this the thing itself? Or is this hamischaber, it's only associative? It is tangential, peripheral. It is not the main thing. If I was try to put it into simple English, is it the thing itself? Or is this just something that's connected to something else? It's not the topic itself. And then he goes on the next page, go over to the next page in the next paragraph. And when he says, if you work out that the data that you've just picked up on a particular topic is not the thing itself, but it is mischaber, it is a connected part, it is a tangential, it's a tangent, it's not the thing itself, then you need to ask yourself, okay, it is not the thing itself. Is this koidem, im nimshach, im mislave, im atzmi, im mikri, im bekoyach, im bepoil? What does that mean? You ask yourself, is this a detail, something, it's not the thing itself. In other words, he's saying, you come across an idea and you might be mistaken to think that this idea captures the essence of whatever it is. But it might be wrong, it might not be. It might just be something that connects to the thing itself. Well, how does it connect? Imagine you were doing a diagram, a spider diagram. So would it come higher up in the hierarchy? Would it come lower down than the thing itself? Or is it on the same level? Is it absolute? Is this idea, is the connection to the thing I'm trying to study absolute, or is it relative? Does it have limitations? If it is limited, what are the parameters of this limitation? Now, I accept that this last bit is very subtle, and it's almost quite philosophical, but I thought it's important that you realize this. This is, he says, I'm now going to set out to put all of Yiddishkeit into a sefer that will give you the tools to then give the answer to all of these questions and get, as it were, all of Yiddishkeit in one place. How on earth am I going to do that, he says. And here in the third paragraph, or maybe the fourth, depending on which version you're using, 1, 2, 3. In mine, it's the fourth paragraph. He says, I'll tell you the way to do it. And this is a theme that is very beloved of him as he goes through his Sfarim. He says, Yedias HaKlolim, to know the rules, the generalities. I will take a topic, which is not a little detail, he says. What I will do is, I will take, let's say the first bit, he's going to talk about Hashem. Okay, so he's going to start off talking about Hashem. He is going to give us the high-level rules and general principles that you need to know about Hashem. And then, to some extent, you'll go away and fill in some of the details. But if you have, he says, and this is true of any topic, if you have access to the rules, the principles in any topic, if you know all the principles carefully and clearly, you're done. Because then it's so much easier to be able to work out what the details are, how many they are, where they fit in. Because if he was to give you all the details of all of Yiddishkeit, it's impossible. There's no end. So this sefer, he says, I'm going to use principles. I'm going to give you principles of all of these things. Then he goes on to say, and this is in the 5th or 6th paragraph, we're coming to the end of the introduction. He says, what I'm going to do in his trademark humility, he says, dear reader, I have made this chibur koton zeh, this small pamphlet, and my idea, kavanossi boy, is to lay before you, I'm going to read, klolei ha'emunah v'ha'avodah al buryam, the general principles of emunah and avodas Hashem with clarity, so that you will be able, he says, not to be confused. Mutzal min ha'irbuv v'ha'mavucha. If you know this sefer Derech Hashem and somebody comes up to you and tells you an idea in Yiddishkeit, you will be able to immediately pick up an instinct. You will know, no, this is not Yiddishkeit. I don't know what it is, but it isn't Yiddishkeit. You will develop an intuitive knowledge if we can grasp and know the principles of belief and service of Hashem. The principles, because it's not a big sefer. If you can get that clear, he says, you will no longer have confusion. When you hear or read about something, you'll be familiar with Yiddishkeit. It will save you from confusion, which is an amazing thing. How many people today are confused? They don't know what the right thing is. Okay, then the very last thing of the introduction, and we'll still got a few more minutes. The very last bit is, he says, I called the Sefer Derech Hashem because it is klal midrochov yizbarach shemai. It is the klal, the generality of all of Hashem's derachim. Remember, that was the question I asked you. V'holachto bidrochov, Hashem has many, but he calls the Sefer Derech Hashem. He says he has tried to identify, as it were, the highest level principles and rules of all of Hashem's ways. But now here he says something a bit more challenging. Shegila lonu al yidei neviov v'hoidionu v'toirosai. What has he said? I'm in trouble. I really am in trouble, because he said this Derech Hashem, not like I said. What did I say? I said the Derech Hashem, the way it's brought in the Pasuk, is one that Avraham Avinu intuitively understood. He worked it out. And he's telling us that the Derech Hashem that he's going to teach us, this high level, these high level principles, which he has distilled into one Derech, one Sefer, comes about, Shegila lonu al yidei neviov v'hoidionu b'toirosei. He connects them to revelation, the Nevi'im and Torah. That's a challenge to what I said before. We're probably not going to answer the challenge tonight, but please try and remember it, because it's an important question. Ubahem menahaleinu umenahel kol briosav, and he says, through these klolim, and here's the other beauty. It's a throwaway phrase here, but it is immense. Do you know what one of the biggest problems that people have when things happen to them in their lives? They say, what is this? What's happening to me? Does it mean that I'm a terrible person? Does it mean Hashem's punishing me? Does it mean he's challenging me? Does it mean, what does it mean? If you know Derech Hashem, you may not know in every single instance what Hashem wants from you now at this moment in time, but there will be no confusion. You will know the principles of the way that he interacts with us. You will have them clear. He says, "Ubahem menahaleinu umenahel kol briosav." These you will know the klolim with which Hashem leads us and leads all of creation. That's an amazing thing. To finish off the introduction, he says, I've divided it into the Sefer into 4 parts. The first part, I will speak about the foundations of all of existence and their details. The second part, Chelik Sheni, I will talk about Hashgacha, the way Hashem interacts with us. The third part, I will talk about prophecy, Nevuah. And the fourth part, I will talk about Avodah, how we are meant to, or rather what. I'm not going to say how, because the how he does in the Silas Yisharim, but the what. He will talk about Avodas Hashem, the what of Avodas Hashem in the final Chelik. Having got through the introduction, we will start, tonight at least, we will start the very first part of the Sefer. And the first part of the Sefer is Perek Rish, so it's Chelik Aleph. The first Chelik talks all about Hashem. Well, actually it talks about all of the fundamental ideas in all of existence, anything that exists, anything. You know, it's really interesting because in science, as I'm sure many of you will know, the word atom, a Greek word, where did the word atom come from? The word atom means that which is indivisible. It was the smallest building block of physical reality. And we, of course, that's a joke today. We know that in every atom, there are hundreds, potentially, of subatomic particles. There's a veritable zoo of all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on in the subatomic world. So here, that's in the physical world. Here he's telling us in the ruchnistic world, or those forces that generate all of reality, I will give you all of the foundations. And he starts off, of course, with the first concept, the most fundamental concept, which is God himself. Perek Rishon Baboire Yizbarach Shemai. the creator. So let's start the first sentence. We're only going to spend a few more minutes because I'm going to try and keep this to 45 minutes. It's more or less 45 minutes. I'm going to start the first sentence. I'm going to whet your appetite to come back next week, hopefully. Because the first sentence, oh boy, it's a very tough one. Kol ish mi Yisrael tzorich sheyamin v'yeda. Every Jew needs to believe and know sheyesh motzei rishon kadmoin v'nitzchi. That there is a, I'm going to leave the word rishon for the moment out because it's complicated. Every Jew needs to know, needs to believe and know. And that is the key thing we're going to start focusing on. When he's talking about Hashem's existence, we need to believe it and know it. So before we go any further, he has said something amazing. Number one, he has said, you have to believe, which itself is a problematic concept philosophically. How can you force somebody to believe? How can you compel somebody to believe something? Belief, if the definition of belief is something that comes from within and you choose, it's a choice. If that's what belief means, then how can you can't then compel somebody to believe. And this, by the way, the Rishonim ask on the mitzvah of emunah. There is a mitzvah of emunah, but we need to ask ourselves, what is that mitzvah? Because if you accept the concept of a mitzvah, a commandment, then by definition, it means you accept, you know there is a commander. If you've accepted a commander, then you don't need the commandment to believe in the commander. And if you don't believe in the existence of a commander, then this non-existent commander can command till he's blue in the face, but you don't accept that he exists. So you're not going to accept a commandment to believe. This is the philosophical problem with the mitzvah of emunah, which the Rishonim ask. But notice he doesn't say here, you have a chiyuv. In the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, he says, "You say the Hasidus v'Sherish Avodah to me, Mashiach Amen v'Yisam Machoivosai, a choiva, an obligation." Here he says, "Tzorich, you need." Interesting. You need to believe. As it happens, human beings do need to believe. That is an essential to the human condition. We all believe in something. It could be, you can believe in a football club. You can believe. Everybody has to believe and trust. But there has to be belief. But he says you have to believe. But it's not enough to believe. You have to know. So you believe and you know. And in that order, the Ramchal, by the way, writes things. He wrote things incredibly precisely. So he writes believe and then know. And that's the problem we're going to have to deal with. What does that mean, to believe and then to know? Does that mean that you start off believing something and then you have to clarify it until you know it? Is it possible to know that there is a God? And if I know there is a God, then where does the emunah come into it? All of these things we need to work through. We'll need to do this next week. But let's just finish at least for now, let's finish this phrase. Every Jew needs to believe and know that there is an entity. Motsui. Motsui means something that is, that just is. And by the way, that's the deepest expression of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. What does Yud Kei Vav Kei mean? Past, present, and future. Existence. Yud Kei Vav Kei means existence. Hashem is. He just is. In fact, he is the biggest is there is. In fact, he's the only thing that needs to be. So he is Rishon, Kadmon, and Nitzchi. And next week we'll go into more detail to explain what that means. What are these different three things? Eternal, primal, and first. What does this mean? But we'll leave it off this week. So we've left off with a question. I have to leave you off with the cliffhanger, which is, what is it? What does this mean to believe and to know? We need both and in that order. What does that mean? And how is that going to work? So hopefully we'll see you again next week. If anybody wants to ask questions now, feel free. I think you can unmute yourselves. Feel free to ask questions, and then we will finish. No questions. That's awesome. Okay. I will create a YouTube video out of this and send it to you as well, so you can review it if you're really, really bored. Okay. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great evening. Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye. Bye.